Hello and welcome to another edition of D&D Stories. My name is Rob from the channel Performance Check, and I will be your host as we talk about the time when something cool happened in the hit role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. So, for those of you who watched my last story, the four-part known as The Shroud, in that story I kind of explained the circumstances in which I was playing D&D. I was playing with my friend Matt and Mike. I'd run them essentially their first proper Dungeons & Dragons campaign. But after the Shroud, which was quite an expansive campaign, we all decided it would be really cool for us to cycle who was going to be the Dungeon Master. So I stepped down from being the Dungeon Master, and my friend Mike, who had previously played Droskor Hammerstone of the Undercroft, took to the podium, took to the throne of the Dungeon Master, and it was now his turn to essentially DM us through the next chapter in the Main Realm series of stories that I will be telling you. Main Realm is our shared setting. Essentially, when we cycled who was playing Dungeon Master, that particular Dungeon Master would create a new part of Main Realm, and within it a new campaign would occur. So Mike had taken his position as Dungeon Master, and that meant that I was going to be a player. And I'm very excited to tell this particular story from the perspective of being a player rather than the one running the game, as the surprises in this particular tale were all experienced by me rather than being delivered by me. And that meant I had to create a character. Who that character is, you will discover shortly, as I will introduce him in the story as he was introduced as we began this new game, this new campaign that Mike was now running, entitled Devil's Line. So as we return to Main Realm, we return to a character who featured prominently in the last story, The Shroud, and that is Theodrix of Hemlon, played by my friend Matt. Theodrix is a ranger, and when we last left him, he had just helped defeat the vile necromancer Dragon Then with the help of his comrade-in-arms, Droskor Hammerstone of the Undercroft, the Dwarven fighter. But in the calamity, in the confusion, in the destruction that final battle upon that mountain wrought, Droskor, at least in Theodrix's mind, had fallen. Droskor had been blasted with significant dimensional powers, essentially, that had blinked him out of existence. Now, whether that means out of existence entirely or just out of this particular existence, you'll just have to wait to see and find out. That's a bit of an obvious hint that Droskor isn't dead, but he is somewhere that will be prudent in stories in the future. For now, Theodrix is wandering through the wilderness, and he is drunk and he is beset by grief and by guilt. Theodrix has, in his misery, wandered across Main Realm. He is headed east, away from the borders of Orenthale, the nation that essentially he and Droskor saved single-handedly. But he retreats away from the place, instead not wanting to be confronted anymore by what had happened in that place. He has wandered into an area known as the Middenlands. The Middenlands are make up of one of the various areas of the world of Main Realm that isn't a strict kingdom or isn't a strict province or domain. It's essentially wilderness where strange settlements of people dwell in. And this particular area of the Middenlands is misty and stormy. There is a constant dour atmosphere in the air. Rain pitter-patters down upon Theodrix as he trudges across the landscape. In his hand there is clasped a cask of finest fire whiskey. As you might remember from the previous story, Theodrix suffers with a problem with alcohol addiction. And this is something, as I've always said, to Matt's credit, the guy who plays Theodrix, to Matt's credit, he played Theodrix as an alcoholic quite accurately, and not mockingly at all, rather quite sincerely. And as such, he was more than happy to take on board some of the nastier side effects and modifiers that occur when a player character, indulges in that kind of vice. And it made the character interesting, very interesting indeed. But essentially we find Theodrix in a very sorry state, trudging through the wilderness, drunk out of his mind. And then one night he arrives in this strange settlement where people stare at him with kind of disgust. Someone spits at him and calls him a vagrant, but Theodrix is too much of in a state to really care or bother himself with the concerns of the peasants, essentially. Theodrix has become very dismissive of people in general at this point. He staggers into a tavern and he spends the evenings there, many evenings, just getting drunk out of his mind and ending up waking up in the gutter the next morning. Theodrix is in a bad place. And this is essentially how Mike set up the start of this story. He kind of gave us this little bit of prologue of what has happened with Theodrix, and he discussed it with Matt, and they decided that, yeah, he would be feeling very guilty and kind of in shock about the horrendous battles that he'd seen. Again, something to both of their credits, they would always show, when they played their characters, my friends, they would always show the cost psychologically on what it would be like to actually be an adventurer, which was very enjoyable to behold. It is on one of these long nights where Theodrix is just dwelling within this small settlement, getting drunk out of his mind. A number of individuals new to the settlement arrive, and they make their presence known rather loudly as they enter this tavern. They are tall, travelling men that essentially work as mercenaries. They seem brash, they seem confident. They've clearly just completed a rather grubby job and have come to the nearest settlement to essentially spend the money they've just earned. They're rather boisterously boasting at the bar, and they're giving the rest of the settlers and the people within the tavern a little bit of grief. Theodrix sits in the corner. He sits mysteriously, not in the kind of edgelord mysterious, the stranger in the dark. Like, this isn't a Strider kind of mysterious sat in the dark. This is the kind of mysterious that is essentially what's wrong with that person kind of mysterious, if you understand my meaning. Theodrix still isn't in a very good place, and groggily he's staring at these mercenaries as they boast about this tavern, and they throw their weight around essentially. And Mike is essentially playing these individuals in a hilarious way, very boisterously. And he describes that these mercenaries appear to be wearing their coin purses on rather long strings at their sides. He explains to Theodrix that he would have maybe seen this before in certain human cultures in Main Realm. Particularly arrogant people of a certain class would essentially wear their coin purses low, almost inviting thieves to just try and rob from them. They have that sort of mindset. They have that kind of superiority complex where they can just flaunt their wealth and know that if anyone tries to mess with them, there will be severe consequences. So that tells Theodrix everything he needs to know about these individuals. And they make themselves known to Theodrix very quickly, and they start barging him around and start saying, "Hey stranger, you smell of piss," and they start mocking him. And Theodrix has, been called a vagrant, he's been spat on, but finally he kind of snaps, and he groggily gets to his feet and he says, "Do you not know who I am? I'm Theodrix of Hemlon, of the line of Hemlon. Okay, I just saved an entire kingdom. The kingdom of Orenthale is not host to a legion of undead, thanks to me. Okay?" That's essentially how Matt delivered it. And I liked it because one of the great rewards of being a player is that you get rewarded with these stories. That's why we share them. This is why we talk about D&D the way that we do. This character has just completed a campaign. Of course he's gonna bring in his own reputation to try and sort of like sway this particular interaction he's having with these mercenaries. Hemlon, the mercenary, sort of looks over at his friends in a smug and mocking manner, and he says, there's a bit of trouble going on over there. I'm wondering, have you brought it with you? And Theodrex's eyes narrow, trying to detect some kind of lie about there being trouble in Hemlon. Can't really work anything out right now. He's drunk and he's swaying from side to side, and he says, "Oh, I bring trouble wherever I go. But it would seem on this occasion it is you that wish to cause trouble. Why make a scene? I want to sit in my corner and drink my drink. I'm sure you boys have better things to do with your evening than get beaten, and I've had a few." Cut to about a minute later. Initiative has been rolled and Theodrix is flung from the tavern. Hits the ground hard as these mercenaries basically grapple him and are basically dragging him out of the tavern because they want to take him somewhere where they can really work on him. He is completely drunk, and as such the modifiers are particularly harsh for Theodrix at this point. He is doing his best to hold his own against them, but frankly they're beating him. They drag him into an alleyway where essentially they're going to try and finish him off. It is at that point there is an explosion of beaming light that illuminates the entirety of the alleyway. Theodrix, drunkenly squinting at this light, can make out a silhouette of an individual walking down the alleyway. The mercenaries, who are still, fairly healthy, Theodrix has got a few licks in, but generally speaking, they're alright, sort of stagger back in surprise of this. This is most irregular. This is magic. The thunderous voice echoes down the alleyway, and it proclaims to them,
"Stand back and retreat with your lives. Another movement towards the ranger, another breath spoken against his name, and you will be destroyed."
This voice just ripples down the alleyway. A sense of menace, a sense of dread descends upon the mercenaries. They look to each other, terrified, and they begin to back away. Now, mechanically, they're actually under an effect of a fear spell. And all but the leader fail. The leader of this mercenary gang gives a holler, and raising a heavy cudgel into the air, he charges down the alleyway towards the source of the light. This, he discovers, was ill-advised, as he is suddenly, from out of nowhere, engulfed in flame. The leader gives a shriek, grabbing at himself as flames ripple across his body. Again, another blast of fire erupts down the alleyway and catches onto the leader, who backs away, burning, and disappears, screaming into the darkness. Theodrix is pulling himself up to his feet at this point. His hands are shaking, blood pouring from him, as he looks up as this figure approaches down the alleyway. And then the light ebbs and fades away. Theodrix can make out the figure of a tall individual who appears to be wearing a long travelling trench coat. And this stranger reaches a hand down to help Theodrix to his feet. Theodrix slaps it away and backs away. Theodrix doesn't particularly like magic, particularly after his last encounter with it upon a mountain facing a necromancer. He says, "I didn't need your help, whoever you are." And the figure steps a bit closer to Theodrix so he can make out his face. "Who I am," the figure says, "is Valdain, and you're welcome." I would like to introduce you, dear viewers, to Valdain, the character that I play in this campaign, a sorcerer, and a good one too. He is quite tall, has like a long flowing trench coat, like I say. He has this kind of sort of shirt and waistcoat combination as well. At his side he carries a tall staff, and throughout his mane of black hair that sort of sticks up in strange places, he has sort of ribbons of white running through it, denoting that there's something magical about this individual. He has rather startling eyes as well, and he looks into Theodrex's soul almost as this broken individual is desperately trying to pull himself up from the ground. A sorry state of a human being at this point. Look, I was just passing by and I saw that you happened to be in a bit of a situation, so I decided to lend my services. Valdain is sort of trying to make conversation with Theodrex as he pulls himself up to his feet. And Theodrex sort of staggers back towards the tavern. And he realizes to his frustration that the man is following him. And he says, "Listen, stop following me. I'm going to get a drink." And Valdain says, "Well, this is a small town and I've only just arrived myself, and there doesn't appear to be any other inns in this place. So I shall also be going into the tavern." Theodrex scowls. He's in a bit of a bind here. Theodrex has to be in the tavern because Theodrex loves drinking. So if he was to leave, then there'd be no more drink for him. And he doesn't want that. So scowling, Theodrex goes into the tavern and Valdain follows him. Theodrex sits at a table and Valdain sits down opposite him. "There are other tables," Theodrex says with an annoyed kind of expression across his face. He's like sort of dabbing at bruises and cuts that he's received from his beating. "There are other tables," Valdain says, "but since I just saved you, I think the very least you could do is buy me a drink, please. I'm a little short." Theodrex says, "If I buy you a drink, will you leave me alone?" "No," says Valdain with a smile. "Oh, and I didn't catch your name." "You have mine, so..." Theodrix just scowls. "Come on, what's the harm? The last time I said who I was, I got into a fight with 4 mercenaries." "Huh. Is that all it takes to get into a fight around these here parts? Very interesting indeed. Oh, go on, I promise I won't have a fight with you." "I'll win if we do," says Valdain with that. He sort of makes a joke looking at how battered Theodrex is. "My name is Theodrix of Hemlon." "Hemlon," says Valdain. "Now that is interesting. Why is that interesting?" "Well, I've actually wandered for many days across many realms, and I've heard of Hemlon. I've passed it once or twice in my travels." Theodrex says, "It isn't the most hospitable place, especially not for me. I am exiled from it." And Valdain says, "What did you get exiled for?" And Theodrex says, "None of your business. Leave me alone." And Valdain says, "Well, if I leave you alone, then I won't be able to tell you the news that I heard about Hemlon." Theodrex says, "What news?" Valdain says, "Get me a drink and I will tell you. I will tell you all the news about Hemlon. I have a lot of news about Hemlon." "Fine," says Theodrex, and annoyed goes and buys the sorcerer a drink. Now essentially Mike the DM had told me that I would have heard of Hemlon. I wouldn't need to do any kind of knowledge check. Valdain would have heard of Hemlon and, like he said, had travelled past it once or twice on his previous travels. And Valdain has essentially heard that there is trouble afoot in Hemlon. The place seems to be under siege by dark forces that have not yet fully emerged, but there have been tales of murders and hunting parties of rangers going missing and the like. And Valdain, after receiving this drink, informs Theodrex of this. There are many dark forces that move in the woods of Hemlon, and while your line of rangers are adept, it would seem that there is a dark purpose that is being enacted there. Whatever it is, the rangers cannot see it. I don't know whether you were paying attention, Theodrix says, but as I told you, I'm exiled. I can't return there. Valdain says, I didn't say anything about returning there. I didn't say anything about returning there at all, Theodrix. I think that's actually something that you thought of and you want to do. It doesn't matter if I want to do it, Theodrix says. It doesn't matter. I am exiled. If I go back there, I will be killed. And Valdain says, okay, but what if you go back there and you help them? Help them? How can I help them? I can't help anyone, says Theodrix. The drunken haze over the ranger becomes all the more apparent. Valdain gives a nod. I'm going to ask you a question that you might not like, but I'm going to ask you. Are you okay? And Theodrix just says, no. Well, why don't you sleep on it? Maybe you want to go to Hemlon in the morning. And Theodrix says, what interest do you have in Hemlon? I don't have much of an interest in Hemlon at all. I'm going to be completely honest with you, Theodrix. I can call you Theodrix, can't I? Good. I'm afraid to say I have no interest in the place. However, I do have an interest in expanding my horizons, seeking new opportunities when they become available, broadening my already immense power, and of course, helping people. Theodrix blinks. Not quite sure what to make of this individual. I do fear for some who dwell there. I still have kin there. Valdain nods. Let's go. What do you mean, says Theodrix? It's in the middle of the night. Oh yeah, says Valdain. We can go anyway. No, we should wait till the morning, says Theodrix. Okay, fine, we can wait till morning. What do you want to do until then? Sleep, says Theodrix.
Fool!
Valdain's voice echoes through the tavern and everyone inside falls silent. The sorcerer's attitude is instantly changed and he's risen from his chair. Theodrix is just sat back, like his hair swept back almost from the shock of this sorcerer's change of attitude, like that. And Theodrix says, What is it? Valdain says, you waste precious time. We must go now. For someone who has no interest in this place, you do seem certainly keen on going there. And by the way, what's this we all of a sudden? Theodrix begins to complain, as Matt used to like to complain as well. What's this us all of a sudden? Why is it going to be me and you? I don't trust you. And by the way, I'm not such a fan of magic. Last time I had an encounter with magic, my friend... Your friend what? Says Valdain. Doesn't matter, says Theodrix. Please just leave me alone. Valdain says, listen, I may not have been entirely truthful with you. There are reasons why I would like to go with you, but I assure you, none of them will conflict with anything that you would want to do. I assure you, I'm merely just along for the ride. What's in it for me, says Theodrix. I will offer you protection on the dangerous road east from here. Theodrix scoffs. Hemlon is southeast, I think you'll find. And there we have it, says Valdain. You know these parts, and you are a ranger. You will be a guide. If I'm a guide, I need to be paid, says Theodrix. I'm not going to pay you. Okay, let's just work together. That's what people do, don't they? They meet in taverns and they decide to work together. Why are you being so difficult about this? And Matt was being quite difficult about this. But, you know, it's kind of realistic. Why would you just instantly start going on an adventure with someone you just met? Look, says Valdain, you can see that my power is incredibly useful to have around. If it wasn't for me, I'm afraid to say, you would be dead. And Theodrix sort of looks to the ground, really annoyed by this. Theodrix doesn't like to be indebted to people. Fine, says Theodrix. Fine, you can come with me if you want, but I can't say I'm going to be friendly to you, and if we find any treasure, then I'm not going to split it with you, and if we get into a fight and it looks like that you're going to die, I'm probably just going to leave you, okay? And Valdain just stares at him and says, that's awful. That's an awful thing to say. And Theodre says, yeah, sorry, alright, let's just go to bed. The sun rises and the next morning comes around, and Valdain and Theodrix begin their journey southeast towards Hemlon. And as they travel towards that lush vale, Valdain is in an incredibly good mood and comments about the beauty of the landscape and finds wonder in the wildlife that they see when they pass by. Theodrix is nursing a hangover and isn't particularly happy with the situation, so just grumbles along as they go. Valdain takes note that Theodrix still sips heavily from a bottle of fire whiskey he'd restocked from the tavern before he left, and they are now journeying across the wilderness with, well, a swaying sort of line, shall we say. Theodrix, while a skilled ranger, isn't immune to the alcohol's effects when it comes to pathfinding, and they travel for many days. And although talk is scarce, one night Theodrix sort of just loses his cool a bit, and he turns to Valdain and he says, "You know, you never said what your reasons were for wanting to come to Hemlon. I mean, you gave vague answers about wanting to help people and expand your power, but who doesn't want to expand their power and help people?" says Valdain. "I've tried helping people, and it gets you nowhere," says Theodrix. "What do you mean?" I fought for a realm to the west of here known as Orenthale. "I know it," says Valdain. "Is there anywhere you don't know?" "Plenty of places, and that's why I keep travelling." "Do continue. You fought for Orenthale?" "Yes, I fought for Orenthale. I fought to save it from the necromantic scourge. And you know what? I got nothing out of it. I sought to help the people there, and I got nothing in return." Now, as you recall, the beginning of this story began with Theodrix voluntarily just leaving Orenthale, so he's spinning a bit of a lie here, which Mike asks me to make a sense motive check. And Valdain basically can tell that maybe he isn't being entirely truthful about this. Social skills, Valdain is very charismatic, charisma being the sorcerer's, most potent ability score, as it were. But wisdom, not so high for the sense motive, so maybe he's lying, maybe he's not. But it's interesting to note that Theodrix keeps certain bits of that, his last quest, hidden from Valdain at this point. "Look, Theodrix, I'm going to level with you. I couldn't help but notice that there are strange mystical powers that seem to be converging around this area of Main Realm, in particular around the Middenlands, Hemlon, and Ireland, the nation and kingdom to the south." "Mystical what?" says Theodrix. "It'll be very difficult to explain. Just magical disturbances, and to be honest, I can't help myself. I have a very powerful sense of curiosity, and I find it's best to just let me go where the wind takes me. I just see what happens. You never know what's around the corner, Theodrix." It's at that point that Mike asks for a spot check. Theodrix succeeds with the highest roll, his rangery eyes staring down into the Vale, this sweeping forested landscape. But through the trees, Theodrix is able to spot a commotion. A battle is currently underway. There is a number of individuals clashing in combat at the gully at the very bottom of this sloping valley. Theodrix looks to Valdain, Valdain looks to Theodrix, and they scout closer, wanting to see what exactly is going on. As they draw closer, Theodrix is able to recognize that about 20 or 30 rangers of Hemlon are locked in battle with what look to be like a vast amount of reavers and bandits almost, but they seem to be garbed in the same sort of black dour rags hanging from them. They appear to be wielding ceremonial knives and swords. They have strange art and makeup daubed across their faces and piercings along their eyebrows and the like, and it would seem that the Rangers of Hemlon are outnumbered. Theodrix looks to Valdain and says, "If I reveal myself, if I go and help them, they will see who I am, they will know me, I will be executed." And Valdain just looks at Theodrix and says, "It's your choice, but if we don't intervene, they might lose. What then? Will you be able to forgive yourself for that?" And Theodrix says, "What are you, my therapist? Why you... After a very brief and heated discussion as to whether or not they should engage, Theodrix takes up his bow and looses the first shot, and they enter the established initiative. Theodrix is firing shot after shot as he runs to join the ranks of the Rangers, who are currently locked in melee combat at this point with these Reavers, these screaming hordes. Theodrix begins the battle fairly successfully, felling enemies as he rushes to his former comrades. Valdain stands and begins to just casually walk towards the lines of the Reavers. As Theodrix and Valdain came from the flank, as it were, Valdain reaches out his hands, essentially tries the same trick that he did in the alleyway, and his voice becomes deeper and thunderous, and his face becomes shadowy and his eyes begin to glow, and he says,
Reavers, you trespass here in the land of Hemlon. Go back to the swamp in which you were spawned.
And some of them appear to be a little bit disturbed by this, but most of them are driven with sort of a fanatical kind of passion and are not really too bothered about attacking the Rangers because some man in a long coat is telling them to do so. So Valdain attempts something else. He lifts a hand in front of them and lets loose a blast of magic missiles that home in upon his opponents. Theodrix is dodging around the ranks of both allies and enemies to get shot after shot after shot onto the Reavers, and one takes a swinging slice at the Ranger. He's able to duck beneath the attack, his armor class having improved a little bit from the last campaign. Theodrix is then able to draw his sword and then go into close combat with these Reavers. The Rangers of Hemlon are incredibly skilled, and they fight dirty as well. They are using dirks. They are basically getting up close and personal with these Reavers. And while the Reavers are plentiful, the Rangers make up for their lack of numbers with their skill and determination to defend their homeland, essentially, gutting these people left and right. Valdain sees that these Reavers are forming a new line and they are charging again against the Rangers' ranks. And he reaches forth a hand, and swirling in his palm, you can see that there is this flaming ball that grows larger and larger and larger until it is but a flaming sphere, the spell. And he basically drops it onto the ground and begins rolling it forward with telekinetic energy, just this sort of flaming ball of destruction across the line of these Reavers that go to strike the Rangers. With Theodrix and Valdain's help, the tide of battle is certainly turned, and the Reavers, those that remain, begin to retreat. The Rangers give chase and fire arrows at the backs of their enemies, and they fall dead. The victory is theirs, but before Theodrix is even able to turn to one of his old comrades, there is a vast rumbling. The ground before them cracks, and smoke billows up from nowhere. The Rangers look in horror. Theodrix and Valdain look in horror as a horned figure steps from the smoke. He has oily silver skin and jet black armor with a long cloak that rolls down behind his back. Wielding a vast black onyx blade, a tiefling stands before them. Valdain strides forward, a spell glowing in his palm, and he looks at the tiefling and he says, "You're a long way from home, aren't you? Tell me, which circle?" And the tiefling just glares and doesn't respond. See, the thing is about this particular material plane is that you kind of stand out a little bit. You're not entirely conspicuous. I imagine you are the leader, or at least the commander of this force. Why don't you tell us what you want? Perhaps we'll be able to provide it. Perhaps we'll be able to come up with a solution that will benefit all, says Valdain, as I desperately attempt to make some kind of charisma-based roll to keep this tiefling talking. to get something out of him. The tiefling just glares at Valdain and then sniffs. The lines of this land are weak and frail, but they must be ended regardless, for the devil's line to take its rightful place once again. With that, the tiefling raises his black onyx blade and runs his scaled hand across it, and as it does, the sword erupts into fire. And with his cloak flowing behind him, the tiefling advances upon the sorcerer and the ranger. And that is where we're going to leave our heroes for this edition of D&D Stories. Thank you ever so much for watching. You'll definitely have to tune in next time to see what happens when Valdain and Theodrix face off against this tiefling, sorcerer and ranger against an infernal threat. If you like this video, give it a like. If you'd like to see more like it, then of course, give it a subscribe. And as always, keep gaming.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the D&D Stories Facebook, Patreon, and t-shirts on Redbubble. Keep gaming!